So guys, today I'm here to talk about being an exchange student in China. In one of my previous videos, I talked about how it feels like to come back from an exchange year. And I've mentioned several times in my videos that I've been an exchange student in China. But let's talk about that. So how it is like, or how it was like. China has changed, maybe it's a bit different now, but I want to share my experience anyways. So being an exchange student in China for a Brazilian person, like the Brazilian point of view, I mean, Brazil is in the other side of the world, so the cultural shock was huge. So, anyways, I went to China in August 2005, and I came back to Brazil in July 2009. Oh, sorry, 2006. Crazy, 2006. It was 1 year. Anyway, uh, I was one of the first Brazilians to go to China as an exchange student through the organization of AFS. AFS is the name of the organization who took us there, and it was the first time they took Brazilian people there. It was me and another guy. He was from Rio de Janeiro state, not from the city of Rio, but he was from the state. And he was paying for it, but in my case I got like a scholarship. AFS paid a lot of it. They were distributing these scholarships, and I was one of the candidates, and I got it. So I went there. When we arrived there was this Chinese guy who had lived in Brazil, so he could speak some Portuguese. And my English was really bad back then. I could speak like some verb to be and such. My Chinese was non-existent. So when we got to the hotel, there were so many foreign students from so many places, Europe, Asia, America, and most of them could speak English. Some of us couldn't. A little group that couldn't speak English either, or even English, myself included. And in that case, it was quite hard, the communication. I could talk to the Brazilian guy, but the group was so huge, and sometimes we're divided into groups, and the Brazilian guy wasn't in the same group as me, so as I was, and I had to try my English. That's why I always tell my students, you have to try, you have to do it. And then not the Chinese guy who could speak Portuguese, he was not always around. And after these 2 days in Beijing, in the hotel in Beijing, we went to our destinations. I mean, all these big groups, some of them would go to the north, to the east, to the west, to the other provinces of China. And the Brazilian guy would go to another place completely different from the place I was going to. And then I realized, well, now I have to speak English with these people, or Chinese, but at least English. So we got in the train, and I went to my hometown with some German people and some Italian people that lived there with me, 3 Germans and 1 Italian. 1 German boy, 2 German girls, and 1 Italian girl. The Italian girl, she was still learning how to speak English too, just like me. And then that was something very interesting. I just learned how to speak English. I remember after 4 months, I was talking to people. Like I don't remember exactly when I learned it, when I realized I could learn it. Maybe in 4 months. 4 months, I said, "Wow, I'm talking to people in English now." And then I started to learn some Chinese. So the beginning was a bit complicated, but I learned English because I had to. It was not like, oh, I'm in Brazil and my Brazilian teacher who speaks Portuguese too can speak some Portuguese to me when I have doubts in English. No, I had to speak English. And in the beginning at school, at the Chinese school, you are famous because you are the exchange student. Maybe back then even more because China was still opening up. They weren't very used to foreign people, so it was something quite new for them. In some places in China, especially in the interior, you will be like an attraction because you're a foreigner. Even in big cities like Beijing and Shanghai, when the people from the interior that are visiting those cities, They want to take pictures of you and with you, because they will go back to their hometown and show their families, like, oh, look at this Lawai. Lawai means foreigner. Look at this foreigner I took a picture with. And but back then it was like we got fancy dinners with the directors of the school. They were even seeing the possibility that maybe we would have dinner with the mayor of the city. Like, we were the foreign students, we're famous. I don't know if it's still like that. Maybe it's still at some point, but not like, I mean, maybe to some level, but not like it was back then. So I was quite famous in the beginning. And Chinese host family, I lived with my grandparents, my host grandparents. My Chinese parents used to work in another city, and that happens a lot in China. The parents, they want to give the best to their kids. So if they live in a city and the kids have to study in another city, I mean, they're kids, because back then people could have only one kid in China. I think now is a little more flexible. They can have like 2 kids, but anyway, so it's very common the parents live in another place different from their kids, and the kids live with their grandparents, or they even because we slept at the school. There were like apartments in the school, and we would live there the whole week. We would go home on Saturday evening and come back to school on Sunday evening. We would study on Sunday night. That's something. In China, at least my school, we would study in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. And even after we went to sleep in the apartments, in the bedrooms, I could see that the people from the 3rd grade, the 3rd year of high school, in China, the last year is the 3rd one, just like in Brazil. So the people from the last year of high school, they were still studying. They used to study 1 hour more than us when we went to sleep. So in China, people study a lot. I didn't study a lot because it was hard to understand everything in Chinese. I remember I had to do the English tests, but the others were optional. We had class of traditional painting. I did some. I was not very good. Kung Fu classes, computer classes, let's say like that, multimedia classes, something. Many extracurricular stuff. But stay in class when you don't speak Chinese, you're like clueless about what's going on until you start to learn. And then, so it was like this. We would wake up, run around the soccer field, that athletic track, and running around. And after that, we would go to the classroom during the morning. We had like 10 minutes of interval between the classes. And then about 9 o'clock or something, we have a long interval, like half an hour. I would hang around with the other foreign students. We were very close. It's funny, like I always try to be close with my Chinese classmates, but it seemed I was closer to my fellow exchange students, because you know when you are around someone that is going through the same experience than you are, so we were always close. Maybe because of that, we knew what the other was feeling and going through. So and then we would have lunch and have some time to sleep. We could go to the bedroom and sleep. In the afternoon, we would come back, study again, the same thing. And then before evening, in the afternoon, like at 5 or 6 p.m., something like that, we would have a long interval, and we would have dinner. We could go to the bedrooms. We could play sports, play soccer, play basketball, just play around the school. The campus of the school is really large. China has some large schools. And then after that, in the evening, we would go back to class again and study until 10 o'clock or something. No, not 10 o'clock. It was too late, 9 and 9:30, thereabouts. And then we would have... yes, and between these evening classes, we would have like supper. We would eat some very light food, and come back to classes, and then we'll go to sleep. Uh, if you were in first grade or second grade, the first year or the second year of high school. Um, and it was like that every Monday. They would raise the flag and sing the national anthem. Um, yes, it was a national anthem. As the national anthem was on Monday, I think. The other days from Thursday to Saturday we just run around the soccer field, football field. I prefer to say football. In China they study, at least when I was there, they said British English, maybe because of Hong Kong or something. Uh, anyway, holidays. We had a bunch of holidays in China, like the autumn festival, the Christmas is not a holiday in China. Like yeah, we went to class on Christmas, but no, Christmas was on Sunday back then, I think. But anyway, we didn't go to school at night. There were some festivals and some presentations. They consider Christmas like this foreign festival, and they don't, let's say they celebrate it. They just commemorate it with some foreign stuff. And then we went there and talked about, oh, in my country we do this, in my country we do that, in Chinese. And then you have the Spring Festival during the Chinese New Year. Around February, the Chinese calendar is a bit different from the Western calendar. It's like they use both. You have a calendar on the desk, on the table, and then you can see it's like both dates. In one date they have the Chinese date and the Western date. And then it was it's a very important holiday in China. It's like Christmas for us. So we went to my Chinese host brother's hometown, and they stood some time there. And then we came back to classes on February or March something, and we had the rest of the year. I think during spring, when spring was arriving in the northern hemisphere, AFS, the organization, they took us to this trip, this AFS trip. All the students from all China, the foreign students that AFS had brought there, we got together and went into a trip. No Chinese people, no Chinese families, only the exchange students. We went to the province of Yunnan in the south. It was a bit warmer than in China. Well, it was a nice trip to see everyone back again, all the other students, the Brazilian guy. We visit some nice sites. The Park of the Minorities. China has lots of minority groups. They have their own language and stuff. We went there. We visited one of the mountains of the Jade Dragon Snow Mountain. It's part of the Himalayas, and it was so nice to go there. And then as we visit the stone forest, is the legend of the Sun Wukong. Comes from the Sun Wukong was the legend that Dragon Ball was based. It was a monkey that could fly in a golden cloud and had this a stick that would grow. So Dragon Ball was based on that. And then we visit this stone forest, and we visit a historical city, many places. Then we went back to our hometowns. My hometown was named Deyang in the province of Sichuan. The food there is very spicy. It's funny because some people say, "Oh, tell me about the Chinese cuisine." So, but there is no thing such as Chinese cuisine. China is large, so it changes. Like I lived in Sichuan. The food is very spicy, very, very spicy, very hot, let's say. And if you go to the north, things are different. If you go to the south or to the west, things are different. So I can tell about Sichuan. And it's funny because I got used to the pepper, to this hot food. And then when I would eat the same food, the same recipe, but from another province, I would find it like, yeah, it's not the same without the pepper. It's not hot enough. That's very interesting. That's how I taste Chinese food. It must be hot. Uh, Except for some specific food from some place like the duck from Beijing, very nice, very tasty. I miss it. I miss Sichuan food. I went there in the beginning of this year, and I could eat it again. It was nice to eat the food that I haven't eaten for so long. So and after I got along well with my Chinese host family, but there was a moment during the half of my exchange program that we had some conflict. Maybe I thought I would go to another family, but we made peace. Um, and I was together with them the whole year. When I in the beginning of this year, when I went there to visit China, I visited them. It was so nice to see them again. Sorry. So we had a little bit of this conflict, but it was very small. It was not something important. I really got along well with them, and so the year was ending. My exchange year was ending. The school year was ending too. I remember that we didn't use uniforms back then. I went there this year and I saw they using uniforms, they using jackets. It was winter anyway, but I remember that back then Chinese students didn't use uniform. Japanese students they used to use. Maybe China uh, saw Japan doing that and thought it was interesting. But I remember back then we didn't use any uniforms, just normal clothes to go to school. And so I remember I was in first grade. I was in third grade in Brazil, but for some reason they put me in first grade there, the first year of high school. And I remember that when we did 6 months, and in the second semester, the students could like choose if they would prefer the humanities or the exact sciences, like Chinese, history, literature, and geography, or do you prefer math, physics, and chemistry? Something like that. There is like there was, I don't know if it's still the case. There was like this division, uh, so we could choose. My Chinese brother went to the exact science, like math and stuff, and I went with him. And also there's something that I'm not remembering now. I remember that about that. Um, Also the lots of extracurricular stuff. Uh, Sports meeting. We had this big sports meeting. Um, it was 2005 2006, so they were preparing for the Olympic Games in 2008. So there was this optimism going on in China about the Olympic Games, you know. And then we had this huge sports meeting. There were lots of sports that you could participate. Back then in Brazil, here in Brazil, it was a bit complicated. You could play like football or soccer or volleyball, and that was it. But in China, they had so many options. I liked that. I participated in athleticism. I was fast back then. I could run fast. The funny thing was that when the Chinese guys saw me, they said, "Oh, you're Brazilian. You must be very good in soccer, or in this case, at football." They used to say football and say, "Nah," because I really suck at soccer, at football. But because I'm Brazilian, they thought I was good. And then soon enough, they realized I wasn't. Um Anyway, so they it's like Chinese people study a lot. I remember my school name was the Young Foreign Languages School, so they have this focus on language learning, and they could speak some nice English that they learned at school. Not here in Brazil that you have to hire a private English school like mine. So well, that's it. No, most of my year was like this. They would let me go outside of the school. Since I was a foreigner, I had these little privileges. I could get out of school and go to downtown. I asked them for it because I said, look, I'm going to stay here only 1 year, and maybe I want to know the city. I want to know places. I don't want to stay at school all the time. I couldn't go to live at my parents' home because they live in another city. but at least I could go out and go around school with my friends. It was different. Like my Chinese classmates, they lived in China. They would stay there for a long time, but I wouldn't. So I wanted to go outside, and they let me. As the relationship with teachers, you know, when you watch those kung fu movies and the teacher and the apprentice, they have this almost father-son relationship. So I felt that in China, if you need help, talk to your teachers. They will listen to you. They have a close relationship with the students. All times I had problems, I would talk to my teachers. They were so nice and comprehensive. So that's something I liked about China, was this relationship between teachers and students. Of course, you have to respect them. There is this traditional stuff that you have to respect teachers, but there is also this trusting relationship. And well, that's it. I mean, of course, it was 1 year, but I'm trying to make it in a short video. But that's how it was like to be an exchange student in China. If you have been an exchange student in China, or if you will be, and you know something different from what I know, or you lived something different from what I lived, comment below, subscribe and like this video if you like it. If you don't like the video, tell me why you didn't like the video. So that's it, guys. Bye.